Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Anthony Joshua is seemingly frustrated that he can't get the sort of respect he thinks he deserves from the United States of America. So he's made some comments which I'll get to, and then on to a few thoughts, because in part I think he's right, but at the same time he's got to do more to crack the American market, because if he does that, the plaudits will come. So to the quotes first, talking to JD Sports, Joshua stated, "Last year was a difficult time in my career. Last year was a real tough year. As a British heavyweight fighter, we never get the respect from the world media, which is governed by America to a certain degree, because we're British. Americans are going to take care of Americans, so when I lost, you take challenges. The goal is to win 100%. I felt, and I still stand by that today, that everyone had written me off. So I said, cool, they're telling me, man, Josh shouldn't go in there for the rematch. He's crazy. I'm talking about some of my idols and stuff like that. So the best thing about Saudi Arabia was proving to myself that no matter what the idols tell me or the experts, no one can go against the gut feel that I have. That's why at the end of the fight there's a clip where Eddie's jumping, my manager Freddie's jumping, and I'm kind of standing there. I remember when I said I win, everybody must bow to me. So it was like my emperor moment. I said what I was going to do, so talk the talk, walk the walk. That was the best thing about Saudi." Okay, there's a bit to unpack there. So first off, this notion that he doesn't get the respect from the world media, as he puts it, because he's a British fighter, yeah, I don't agree with that. We actually need to separate the United States of America and the world media out from each other. What Joshua is really saying is he's not getting the respect and credit that he wants from the American market, the American media, the writers, the fans, etc. As I see it, in terms of the world side, Joshua actually gets a decent amount of exposure from the world media. Consider this. While boxing might only be a niche sport in many countries, Joshua has a profile in many countries that outstrips boxing's general popularity in those countries. I would sort of put him in that category of B-level world sporting star. He's famous, but he hasn't quite reached LeBron, Ronaldo type status. But for anyone who says that Joshua's not famous and doesn't have a profile in the world, they're kidding themselves. Even in a local mall near where I live in New Zealand, which is, one of the farthest flung countries in the world, there's a Joshua Under Armour advertising plastered on the windows of a shop window in the mall that I go to. So he does have reach. He's got appeal globally, not just through fighting, but also endorsements. And that sometimes goes hand in hand. And when he fights, my national media reports on his fights, and I'm sure that's true for many countries. So this talk of the world media being governed by America, especially in the context of sports media coverage, because let's face it, Joshua's a sportsman. This is really where we should be talking, in the sporting media coverage. I'm not buying it. His real issue is with the USA. Let's face it, it is. He's saying he's not getting the respect that he should be because he's British. And there is a few points to make here, because I think context is important. America, it's a massive country with a massive population, a massive economy, and sport is a big part of the American culture. But also, the USA has for a long time been viewed by the outside, by observers, as being rather insular, focusing on themselves for the most part, their own issues. This also rolls over into the sporting landscape, in my opinion. Major sports in America and those who participate within them will naturally receive more coverage from the media. In Joshua's case, he's fought all but one fight outside the United States. So there is an element of out of sight, out of mind for general sporting fans, and that will extend to the general coverage that Joshua receives in the United States from the US media. Not just boxing media, because he gets plenty of coverage from them, but I think more broadly from American media. And also, I don't think Joshua's really on the money here in just saying it's a British fighter thing. It's actually any foreign athlete who's not plying their craft in America. They're likely going to struggle to get cut through to a large degree in America because they're not competing there. America has also been boxing's power base for decades. It's where the money has been, where the biggest fights have been held, the schedule week to week, New York, Las Vegas, LA, other places as well. And to crack America, you have to fight in America. That has been something that's always been true. It's not new. Some have tried and failed, but others, like Lennox Lewis, he succeeded to a large extent. And in Lewis's case, he, for years, even though he was fighting there, was struggling to get the respect that he deserved in his prime, despite fighting most of the best guys of his generation. He wasn't really ever embraced, as it were, by the American media. But almost 20 years on, Lewis is getting far more love than I ever remember he got during his fighting days. But not being embraced by the American media, it's not exactly a new thing. Joshua has always been fighting against that, as have other foreign fighters, not just British fighters. But let's be real, Joshua hasn't cracked America with any legacy-defining fights, not a legacy-defining run that he's been on in America. The one fight that he did have in New York, he was beaten up in one of the biggest upsets in boxing in the past 30 years. So while he did prove a lot of doubters wrong in the rematch, that fight wasn't in America. He didn't return to the scene of the crime to avenge the loss. He went elsewhere. And say if Joshua had returned to New York, had knocked Andy Ruiz Jr. out, I guarantee the amount of credit he would have gotten from a win like that in America from the American media and fans more broadly would have been a lot more than his safety first win in Saudi Arabia. And I'm not trying to discount or discredit Joshua's win in Saudi Arabia because he did what he had to do. Ultimately, that's what matters. He got his belts back. But say had he had a movie-style ending with Ruiz in the rematch in America, that sort of thing plays better in America. Just a reality. If Joshua does want to get the respect that he is clearly now craving, he needs to actually have some of the biggest fights in the sport in America. He would need to be beating the best of his generation in America. But if he only has one fight here, one fight there, etc., he's probably going to struggle to win over the American media and fans more broadly. Sure, hardcore boxing fans, Joshua has, some supporters in America, but you know what I'm talking about. The broader casual sporting public. If he hasn't got them now, how is he going to get them? By not fighting in America. To an extent, we can probably also argue that Joshua having 3 belts and the lack of true American contenders probably also works against him. For example, you can't stage Joshua vs. Pulev in the United States because not enough people care about that fight in that country, and it's not necessarily seen as a legacy-defining fight. But you have to do it because it's a mandatory challenger. And with 3 belts, there's always another mandatory around the corner. And sometimes it does throw up good, but not great fights. And that was part of the problem that Vladimir Klitschko ran into, defending mandatories. Not enough interesting opponents often enough. And some of the fights, they were dull. And ultimately, Vlad and his camp had to abandon America and go to Germany, where he defended his belt a number of times. And I know some people will say, look, the UK's got, all the belts right now. It's not just about America. And, some of that is true. It's not just about America. But as I mentioned previously, it is still the power base for the sport. It's where the money is. Even Joshua's had a taste of that with Ruiz Jr. in that first fight, where he reportedly made, at that point in his career, a career-high payday, which has since been surpassed by what he made in Saudi Arabia. And I know some will point out, well, clearly Saudi Arabia's got deep pockets, they could become a power base, etc., or other countries, but, at the moment, the likes of a Saudi Arabia, they're just cherry-picking fights. They don't have the week-in, week-out grind like the United States, where promotional companies like Top Rank, PBC, and DAZN are operating. And currently, another issue for Joshua is the thin crop of American heavyweights. Beyond a Deontay Wilder fight, even if he was to fight in America for a prolonged run, the viable options to build a big fight feeding off the USA-UK rivalry, you've only got the likes of Andy Ruiz Jr. He's already fought him twice. You've got Jarrell Miller. He failed drug testing ahead of what would have been a fight with Joshua. Then you start getting to the likes of Charles Martin, Dominic Breazeale, Adam Kovnatsky, and 2 of those Joshua's already beaten, and the other Kovnatsky just lost himself. there's actually not many names that, fans would put up with and be happy with beyond one or two guys. And Joshua fighting Tyson Fury in Vegas, that's one way to potentially solidify Joshua's legacy, build his reputation and legacy in the United States. If he won that, of course. But at the end of the day, that's two Brits fighting in the United States for all the marbles potentially for an undisputed fight. Doesn't quite feel like that should be the location for that fight, does it? And the reality is, Joshua might struggle to get the respect he thinks he deserves from America unless he does something about it to change that. And he campaigns almost exclusively in America, fighting mostly Americans. Doesn't sound likely, does it? Joshua bases himself in the United Kingdom. He'll travel when he has to, where the money dictates, etc., a la Saudi Arabia. But I don't see him going on any sort of 2, 3, 4 year run in the United States, unless the money is only there. Perhaps one thing Joshua should keep in mind, though, is that not even American heavyweights in recent years have always been lauded by the Americans themselves, by the American media. It was only in the last year or so that American media started to warm up to Deontay Wilder. He'd been calling for respect and his due since he won the title in 2015. He's had a massive chip on his shoulder about people not respecting him and his talents. And it's only been in recent times where fans and media have more warmed up to him. So Joshua is not alone in maybe not getting his respect and due from America, the media, some fans, more broadly. But, it is what it is. I kind of think he should be focusing on other things because he should be looking for the big fights wherever they occur and look to win them and build his legacy that way. It's not the be-all and end-all to fight in America, but if he wants to do something about the lack of respect as he perceives it, well, he knows probably what he has to do. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.